They say a mother's heart can survive anything, loss, loneliness, even betrayal. But that night, I learned that it doesn't survive, it just learns how to hide the breaking. It had been raining since morning. A soft, steady rain that made the air smell like wet leaves and regret. I was folding laundry in the living room when I heard Claire's car pull up, or rather, her ride share. She never stayed in one place long enough to buy her own car. The door opened with her usual rush of perfume and energy. "Hey, Mom," she said cheerfully, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She didn't wait for me to answer. She never did lately. She went straight upstairs, humming some pop song. Her laughter bouncing off the walls like echoes of a girl I used to know. Something about that sound made my chest ache. She hadn't laughed like that in months, not with me, at least. I finished folding the last towel and sat quietly for a while, listening to the rain, the ticking clock, and my own heartbeat. I don't know what made me go upstairs. Maybe instinct, the same one that once told me when she was lying about homework or hiding bad grades in high school. Her bedroom door was open, and there she was, standing by the window, phone in hand, eyes glowing. "What's got you smiling like that?" I asked softly. She turned quickly, startled. Then her smile returned, brighter this time. "Nothing, Mom, just good news." But there was a nervous twitch in her fingers, the kind that only mothers notice. Before I could ask anything else, she ran past me and out the front door. A few minutes later, headlights flashed through the rain. I stepped closer to the window and froze. A white convertible, brand new, parked right in our driveway. My heart dropped into my stomach. Claire jumped out, laughing, spinning in the rain like a little girl showing off a new toy. I hadn't seen her that happy in years. But all I could think was, how? I stepped outside, umbrella in hand. The rain pattered softly above me as I called out, "Claire, whose car is that?" She turned, her wet hair clinging to her face, eyes bright with excitement. "Mine, Mom, can you believe it? It's finally mine." She hugged me, but I didn't move. Her words were a storm I couldn't step into yet. "Yours?" I asked quietly. "How, Claire? You don't have that kind of money." She laughed nervously, brushing wet strands from her forehead. "I just sold a few things. Don't freak out, okay?" My breath caught. "A few things." I knew instantly what she meant. "Claire," I whispered, "what did you sell?" She looked away, and that silence told me everything. The umbrella slipped from my hand and hit the ground. Raindrops soaked my shoulders, but I didn't feel the cold. "Please tell me you didn't," I said. She swallowed hard. "Mom, I didn't think you'd mind. You never even wear that stuff." It was just sitting there collecting dust. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "That stuff was your grandmother's wedding ring. My locket from your father." Every memory I had left that money couldn't buy back. Her expression softened. Almost guilty, but only for a moment. Then she crossed her arms. "I'm sorry, okay? But I needed to do this for me. You don't understand what it's like to always be stuck, Mom. I wanted something that was mine." Her words hit harder than the rain. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned away and walked back into the house. My hands trembled as I touched the glass display box. Where my jewelry had been, the empty velvet cases stared back at me like hollow eyes. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after she went to bed. The rain didn't stop. Neither did my thoughts. Every mother believes her daughter's heart is still soft, still reachable. But sitting there in that quiet house, I realized I didn't know mine anymore. Somewhere between her teenage dreams and my quiet sacrifices, we had lost each other when dawn came. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain easing outside. Then I heard her scream, "Mom!" I ran to the front door. Claire was standing barefoot in the driveway, her hair wild, her face pale. "The car. It's gone. Someone stole it." She pointed to the empty space where the white convertible had been. I stood on the porch, watching her shake, cry, and dial numbers on her phone. Her panic was real. Her pain, too. But what she didn't know, what I wasn't ready to tell her, was that the car hadn't been stolen. It had been taken. Her tears fell freely now, streaking her face like the rain that had stopped but left the world heavy and gray. She turned to me, voice trembling. "Mom, please say you called the police." I shook my head slowly. "No, Claire, what? Why not?" "We have to, because," I said quietly. "Maybe this is how you learn what it feels like to lose something you love." Her mouth fell open, disbelief cutting through her fear. "You think I deserve this?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not my little girl, but a woman who had traded love for pride. She dropped her phone, her voice breaking. "Mom, what are you saying?" I turned away, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Go inside, Claire. It's cold." Behind me, she stood frozen, torn between guilt and confusion. Inside, I sat down again at the same kitchen table, the same cup of cold coffee, the same empty jewelry box. Only this time, I wasn't broken. I was awake. Sometimes love has to hurt before it can heal. Sometimes the only way to protect your child is to let her face her own storm. As I looked out the window, I caught my reflection in the glass, tired eyes, soft lines, and a calm I hadn't felt in years. The rain had finally stopped, and in the quiet that followed, one thought settled in my mind: that car was gone because I made it disappear. Because she needed to learn that truth always costs more than gold. And that night was only the beginning. For today's, Claire barely spoke to me. And honestly, I preferred the silence. She moved around the house like a ghost, slamming doors, making angry phone calls, and muttering things I pretended not to hear. She'd never been good at hiding her guilt. Every time she passed me in the kitchen, she'd glance over, searching for some sign that I'd forgive her. But all she saw was calm. That calm scared her more than my anger ever could. I made her breakfast like always: black coffee, toast, eggs. She didn't touch any of it. She just scrolled through her phone, eyes red from crying. I called the dealership. She said finally. They said maybe the car was towed, but I checked. It wasn't. Someone really took it. Mom, you don't even care? I looked up from my newspaper. I care, I said softly. I just don't see the point in chasing what was never really yours to begin with. Her eyes filled with tears. I worked hard for that car. I wanted to tell her that hard work doesn't begin with betrayal, that you don't build dreams on someone else's pain. But I stayed quiet. Let her sit in the silence she created. After she stormed out, I stared at the empty driveway again. The wet pavement glistened under the early sun, and for a moment, I almost felt guilty. Almost. The truth was, I hadn't stolen her car. I just relocated it. A friend of mine, David, a retired mechanic who owed me a favor, had helped. The car sat safely in his garage on the other side of town, waiting. Not to be destroyed, not to be sold, just waiting for the right moment. Because this wasn't about revenge through destruction. It was about teaching her the worth of what she'd destroyed. That morning, I opened the small chest that once held my jewelry. The velvet inside was still warm from the light that filtered through the kitchen window. I ran my fingers across the empty space where my mother's locket used to be. The memories came rushing back like ghosts. I remembered the day my husband, Paul, had given it to me. We were young, broke, but happy, sitting in our first apartment, eating Chinese takeout. He'd slipped the locket across the table, grinning shyly. Inside it was a tiny picture of the three of us, him, me, and baby Claire, wrapped in a pink blanket. It wasn't gold that made it precious. It was the love behind it. Now, it was gone, sold for something that vanished overnight. And that irony wasn't lost on me. That evening, I drove across town. The air was cold, the streets slick from last night's rain. David's garage sat behind a row of old houses, the kind with ivy climbing the walls and porches that creaked when you stepped on them. He opened the door before I even knocked. She still hasn't figured it out? He asked. I shook my head. Not yet, he chuckled softly. You sure about this, Evelyn? I mean, teaching lessons is one thing, but this girl's your daughter. I know, I said quietly. But she needs to see what she's become. He nodded and led me to the car. There it was, white, sleek, beautiful. Her dream gleaming under the dim garage light. I walked around it slowly, running my fingers along the cold metal. The smell of new leather filled the air. I don't want her to lose it forever, I said finally. Just long enough to make her understand what real loss feels like. David crossed his arms. And when will that be? When she stops blaming everyone else, I whispered. When she looks in the mirror and finally sees herself. On the drive home, I played that conversation over and over in my head. A part of me hated what I was doing. Another part, the one that had cried alone that first night, felt justified. Motherhood changes with time. At first, you protect your children from the world. Then one day, you realize you have to protect the world from what your children might become. When I got home, Claire was sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, phone pressed to her ear. She looked up as I walked in. They found the car, she said, eyes wide. Someone said they saw it near an old garage on the east side. I gave the police the address. My heart sank. What? Yeah, she said, jumping up. I'm going to get it back. I forced a calm expression. Claire, maybe let the police handle it. No, I'm going. I can't just sit here. Before I could stop her, she grabbed her keys and ran out. My chest tightened as I watched her drive away. This wasn't part of the plan. I called David immediately. She's coming your way, I said, voice shaking slightly. What do you want me to do? He asked. Don't let her see you, I said. Just let her find it, he sighed. You sure? Yes, she needs to see it for what it really is. I hung up and waited, pacing the kitchen. The rain started again, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the roof. Every drop felt like a heartbeat. An hour passed before my phone rang. It was Claire. Her voice was trembling. Mom, I found it. I closed my eyes and... It's ruined, she whispered. The paint scratched, the tires slashed. Someone vandalized it. For a second, I couldn't breathe. What? It's destroyed, Mom, my dream car. It's gone. Her voice cracked and suddenly, she wasn't angry anymore. She was broken. I don't understand, she sobbed. Why does this keep happening to me? The line went silent, but I could hear her crying softly. And in that moment, my heart cracked too. Because despite everything, she was still my little girl when she came home later that night. She looked older, smaller, even. Her hands shook as she poured herself a glass of water. I'm sorry, she whispered finally. For the jewelry. For everything. I thought if I had that car, maybe I'd feel like I was doing something right with my life. I stood there, watching her. And for the first time in years, she wasn't pretending. It's not about the car, Claire. I said gently. It's about what you traded for it. Her eyes filled again. You don't know what it's like, Mom. I'm drowning in debt. Everyone I know is moving on, buying houses, getting married, and I'm stuck. I just wanted to feel like I'd made it. Her words hit me like a storm. I saw my younger self in her, chasing meaning in things that never held it. I stepped forward and took her hand. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone, honey. You just have to live with truth. That's something no one can steal. She nodded slowly, tears spilling down. I didn't tell her I'd moved the car, or that I'd found it vandalized afterward. Some truths are better kept for a while, but as I held her that night, I knew something had changed. She was starting to understand the weight of what she'd done, and deep down, I also knew. The real lesson wasn't over yet, because sometimes the truth doesn't heal right away. Sometimes. It breaks you first. It had been a week since Claire's car was found, wrecked, scratched, and lifeless. A dream turned into a ghost. She stopped talking about it after the first few days. But her silence carried more weight than her anger ever did. Every time she passed the kitchen window, her eyes would flick toward the empty driveway, as if she was still hoping it would be there again, shining, perfect, untouched. I didn't ask questions. I just watched. Because sometimes when someone's world falls apart, the best thing you can do is let them hear the sound of it breaking. That morning, she came downstairs late. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen. She poured herself coffee and sat across from me like a stranger trying to start a conversation she didn't want to have. Do you think bad things happen for a reason? She asked suddenly. I looked up from the paper. Sometimes. Why? She shrugged, looking down at her cup. Because it feels like everything I touch just falls apart. The car, the jewelry, my job, everything. Maybe I deserve it. I studied her face, the same face I'd once kissed goodnight 1,000 times. Maybe it's not about deserving, Claire. Maybe it's about listening. She frowned. Listening to what? To what life's trying to tell you, I said quietly. She didn't answer, but her expression softened. Then she stood and walked away, leaving her coffee untouched, a pattern she'd picked up lately. After she left for work, I sat alone in the silence she left behind. The house felt different now. It wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, like it was holding its breath. That's when my phone buzzed. It was David. Evelyn, he said, his voice uneasy. We need to talk. You'd better come by. When I arrived at his garage, he was waiting outside, arms crossed, face tense. The moment I saw him, my stomach dropped. What happened? I asked. He exhaled slowly, nodding toward the car. You should see for yourself. Inside, the air smelled like metal and oil. The white convertible sat in the center, just like before, but this time, it looked worse. The scratches were deeper, the tires more shredded than when I'd last seen it. Someone had poured paint thinner on the hood, leaving ugly burns across the surface. My throat tightened. This wasn't how I left it. David nodded grimly. I know, I found it like this yesterday morning. Someone broken? Who would? He hesitated. I checked the security footage. You should see this. He led me to a small desk with an old monitor. He pressed play. At first, all I saw was darkness, then the grainy image of a woman moving fast, hood pulled up, flashlight in hand. She circled the car once, then pulled something from her pocket, a key. My heart stopped. I knew that walk, that posture, that hair. It was Claire. She had come back. I watched, frozen as the footage played, my daughter, unlocking the car she'd sold my memories for, then taking a wrench to its mirror, slamming it again and again until it shattered. When she stepped back into the dim light, her face was visible just long enough for me to see it clearly, wet with tears, jaw clenched in rage and shame. She hadn't been robbed. She had destroyed it herself. When the video ended, I couldn't move. My chest felt hollow, like every breath was scraped raw. David spoke softly. Evelyn, I don't think she did it out of hate. I nodded weakly. No, she did it out of guilt. We stood in silence for a while, the hum of the garage filling the air. It was one thing to punish her. It was another to realize she was already punishing herself. I drove home in the dark, headlights flickering across the wet road. My reflection in the windshield looked older than I remembered, tired, worn, but steady. I'd thought I understood what revenge meant. But as I parked the car and looked at the house where my daughter was sleeping, I started to wonder if I'd gone too far. That night, I sat by her bedroom door, listening to her cry quietly. She thought I couldn't hear, but a mother always does. Her sobs came in waves: guilt, regret, anger, and between them, silence. A silence so deep, it broke something in me. The next morning, I found her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the horizon. She didn't look up when I joined her. Her voice was hoarse when she finally spoke. I saw the car again. My heartbeat quickened. You did? She nodded slowly. In my dream. It was parked in the driveway, clean and new like before. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a car anymore. It was a jewelry box. And inside were all your things, the necklace, the ring, everything. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't even know who I am anymore. The morning sun touched her face, and for the first time in weeks, I saw my little girl again, hidden under the exhaustion and shame. I placed my hand over hers. You're still you, Claire. You just lost your way. She turned to me, eyes wet. And what about you, Mom? Have you lost yours too? Her question cut through me. Because maybe she was right. Maybe in trying to teach her about honesty, I'd built a lie of my own that day. After she left for work, I drove back to the garage. David was cleaning up, but he stopped when he saw me. You okay? I need to return the car, I said. No matter what's left of it. It's time she sees the truth, he nodded. Are you sure? Yes, I said quietly. I think. The lesson's over. We loaded the car onto the truck, its ruined body covered with a tarp. I followed behind, every mile feeling heavier than the last. When we reached my house, I asked David to leave it by the old oak tree at the end of the driveway. The same place where Claire had first parked it that night. After he left, I stood there for a long time, the wind brushing against my face, carrying the smell of rain and rust. The car looked nothing like the dream she'd once chased. And neither did I. That evening, when Claire came home, she stopped in the driveway, eyes wide, hand trembling. She walked slowly toward it, lifted the tarp, and gasped. Her voice was barely a whisper. You brought it back. I stood at the door, watching her. Yes, because I wanted you to see what chasing something the wrong way does to it. She turned to me, her eyes filling again, but this time not with anger, with understanding. I don't deserve forgiveness, she said softly. Forgiveness isn't about deserve. I replied. It's about letting the pain stop owning you. She nodded, tears falling quietly. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She hugged me. Not the quick, distracted kind of hug she'd given for years, but the kind that says I'm home. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because when I looked into her eyes, I saw a new kind of fear, like she was still hiding something. And that's when I realized there was more to this story. Something she hadn't told me yet, something darker. The next few days passed in uneasy silence. Claire spoke softly now, walked slower, as if afraid that even her footsteps might shatter the fragile peace between us. But something in her eyes told me it wasn't over. That apology was only the surface of something deeper. Something she still hadn't said. That feeling followed me everywhere, through breakfast, through the grocery store, through the nights when I'd wake up and find her light still on down the hall. She wasn't sleeping, and neither was I. One evening, I went upstairs to knock on her door, but stopped when I heard her talking on the phone. Her voice was low, shaky. I told you I'd get the money. I did everything I could. Just give me time, please. I froze. There was no anger in her tone, only fear. A cold, slow wave crawled through me. Money, time, pleading. I stepped back quietly before she noticed. But the sound of that one word, money, stuck in my head like a thorn. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the clock. 11:47 p.m. outside, rain began to fall, tapping against the windows in that slow, heavy rhythm that makes a house feel like it's breathing. My mind wouldn't stop racing. I thought of the car, the jewelry, the tears, the dream. Something didn't fit. Why would Claire sell my jewelry for a car when she'd never cared that much about things before? She wasn't greedy, she was desperate. The next morning, I waited for her to leave for work. The moment she pulled out of the driveway, I went into her room. Her perfume still lingered in the air, that soft floral scent she'd worn since college. On the desk sat her laptop, open, still logged in. My hands shook a little as I touched the trackpad. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but mothers have a different kind of conscience. One that aches when something's wrong. In her email, I found the truth. Dozens of messages from a company I didn't recognize, Emerald Credit Solutions. Final notices. Threats of legal action. Late payments totaling over $38,000, and then one message stood out. From M. Trent. Subject, we need to talk, now. Claire, I trusted you. You said you'd handle it. If this goes public, you'll lose your job and your license. Call me before I call them. I scrolled down further. My heartbeat was pounding now. Another thread, one that made everything snap into place. Mom doesn't know I took her jewelry. Please don't tell anyone. I'll fix it. I promise. My chest tightened. It wasn't about greed. It was blackmail. Someone had backed her into a corner and she'd sold everything that meant something to me. To save herself, I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen until my reflection blurred in the glass. Part of me wanted to storm into her office right then and demand answers. But the other part, the mother in me, wanted to protect her, even from her own mistakes. That night, I waited for her to come home. The air felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves knew a storm was coming. When I heard her car in the driveway, I stayed seated in the living room, hands folded in my lap. She came in quietly, soaked from the rain, jacket dripping onto the floor. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, she froze like she already knew what I'd found. Where were you? I asked gently. Work, she said too quickly. We had a late client. Don't lie to me, Claire. She stopped. Her shoulders slumped. You went through my stuff. I went through my daughter's fear, I said softly. And I found her drowning. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Mom, please, I didn't mean for any of this. Then tell me the truth, I said. All of it. She sank onto the couch, shaking. I made a mistake at work. A big one. I approved a project that failed and the company lost a ton of money. My boss said he'd keep my name off the report if I paid him back quietly, so you sold my jewelry. I whispered. I didn't know what else to do. She cried. I thought I could fix it before you ever found out. And the car? She wiped her face, embarrassed. It was stupid. I panicked. I thought if I had something good, something I wanted, it would make the guilt easier. But it didn't, it just made it worse. I looked at her, my grown daughter, trembling like a child who just realized the world isn't kind. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, like even the sky was listening. Finally, I reached over and took her hand. Claire, I can't excuse what you did, I said quietly. But I understand why you did it. She looked up, stunned. You do? Yes, because I've been there too. Her brows furrowed. I smiled faintly. When your father left, I almost sold my wedding ring. I didn't because I thought it would make me feel weak. But the truth is, desperation doesn't make us weak, it makes us human. She started crying again. Softly this time. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it, I said. You face it. You stop hiding. You tell the truth. She nodded slowly, breathing unevenly. Okay, I'll tell my boss tomorrow. I squeezed her hand. And I'll be right there with you. When she finally went to bed, I stayed sitting in the dark. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled faintly in the distance. I looked out the window at the car under the oak tree. The paint still scarred, the glass still cracked. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal, it was a confession in metal, and yet, something about that email bothered me. The name at the bottom, M. Trent, I'd heard that name before. Years ago. It took me a few minutes to place it, and when I did, my blood ran cold. Mark Trent. Her boss. The same man who'd tried to buy one of my necklaces at an auction 5 years ago. The one I'd refused to sell. Suddenly, everything changed. This wasn't just about Claire's mistake. This was about someone who had wanted what was mine all along and used my daughter to get it. And I knew, at that moment, I wasn't done yet. Because I was about to find out what kind of man would threaten my child and what kind of mother I'd have to become to stop him. I didn't sleep that night. The storm outside had passed, but inside me, another one began. I sat by the window, the house wrapped in silence, thinking of every little thing that had led us here. Claire's trembling hands, the emails. That name, Mark Trent. It echoed in my head like a bell tolling in an empty church. I remembered his face the first time I met him. It was at a charity gala in Seattle years ago. Claire had just started her job, nervous and hopeful, still believing hard work was enough to survive in that world. He was charming then, too charming. The kind of man who smiled just long enough to make you forget he was calculating the whole time. And now, he'd found a way to take what he'd wanted all along. My jewelry. My daughter's peace. My silence. But he'd forgotten one thing. I'd lived long enough to recognize predators in polished suits. The next morning, I drove Claire to work. She was pale, quiet, her fingers twisting around a paper cup of coffee she hadn't even sipped. Are you sure you want to come in with me? She asked, her voice small. I smiled faintly. You faced your fear. Now let me face mine. When we entered the office, Mark Trent was already there. He was taller than I remembered, his hair grayer. But that same smug confidence hung round him like cologne. He looked up, surprised to see me. Mrs. Hale, he said, standing. What a pleasant surprise. Pleasant, I repeated softly, stepping forward. We'll see. Claire's eyes darted between us. I could feel her heartbeat in the air. Mark gestured toward his office. Shall we talk privately? I followed him inside. The blinds were half drawn, slivers of morning light cutting across the dark wooden desk. He closed the door behind us, so, he said, sitting down. I assume Claire told you everything. Not quite everything, I said, taking a seat opposite him. She left out how you blackmailed her. He smiled, slow and deliberate. Blackmail is a strong word. It's the right word, I said quietly. He leaned back, pretending to be relaxed. Mrs. Hale, your daughter made a costly mistake at this company. I gave her a way to make it right. That's not blackmail. That's generosity. Generosity? I tilted my head. By demanding she sell her mother's possessions to pay you off? His smirk faltered for half a second. I didn't tell her to sell your things. No, I said. You just made sure she was desperate enough to do it. He looked away then, just a flicker. But I saw it. The guilt. The power. The calculation. You wouldn't understand, he said finally. This isn't personal. It's business. I stood, my hands calm, my voice even. Everything is personal when you hurt someone's child. He watched me, curious now. What are you planning to do, Mrs. Hale? Go to HR, the police? They'll side with me. They always do. I smiled, and it wasn't kind. You're right. They probably will, he frowned. Then why are you here? Because I wanted to see your face, I said softly. The face of a man who thinks he's untouchable. And with that, I turned and walked out. But my revenge didn't need noise. It needed patience. That evening, after Claire had gone to bed, I sat down at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd once packed her school lunches and greeted her essays. I opened my old laptop. My hands moved slowly but surely, pulling up public business records, shareholder lists, archived financial reports. Years of teaching had made me good at research. Years of heartbreak had made me better at reading people within an hour. I found it, a quiet little company registered under Mark Trent's name, Northline Investments. And buried under that name, fraudulent transactions that traced back to Claire's firm. He wasn't protecting Claire. He was protecting himself. He'd used her signature to cover his own embezzlement. I leaned back, my throat dry. You greedy bastard, I whispered to the empty room. For 3 nights, I gathered evidence, emails, old invoices, screenshots. Everything carefully labeled, dated, and organized. The kind of truth no one could deny. Then, on Friday morning, I sent it all to 3 places at once, the company's board of directors, the Department of Financial Regulation, and Mark Trent himself. No message, no threat. Just proof. By the time Claire came home that evening, the house phone was ringing nonstop. She looked terrified. Mom, what did you do? I smiled gently. What needed to be done? Her phone buzzed again. She stared at the screen. It was Mark. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. His power was gone. The next day, the headlines told the rest. Seattle financial executive under investigation for fraud and extortion. I read it once. Slowly, letting the silence fill the house, Claire walked in behind me. Still in her pajamas, eyes red from crying. He called me this morning, she whispered. He begged me not to tell anyone. Said his career was over. I nodded. Then it's over. She sank into a chair, her voice trembling. Moms, you destroyed him. No, I said quietly. He destroyed himself. I just turned on the light. We sat there together for a long time, 2 women once broken by fear, now breathing again. No victory dance. No celebration. Just stillness. Outside, the sun began to rise. For the first time in months, it didn't feel heavy. Claire reached for my hand. I don't deserve you. I looked at her, my heart soft. You don't have to deserve love, Claire. You just have to learn from it. And in that moment, I saw her not as the daughter who betrayed me, but as the woman who'd finally found her truth. The world outside moved on. Cars passing, birds waking, life continuing, but inside that small kitchen, something infinite shifted. Peace, quiet, fragile, hard-earned peace. But stories like ours never end in a headline. Because the real victory isn't that Mark Trent fell. It's that my daughter stood back up. The house felt lighter that morning. Even the air seemed softer, as if the walls themselves had breathed out months of tension. Claire moved through the kitchen slowly, carrying a mug of coffee. She didn't spill, didn't rush, didn't even glance at me with the anxious eyes she'd worn for weeks. She just existed, whole, quiet, and finally present. I leaned against the counter, watching her, noticing details I had almost forgotten, the curve of her shoulders, the way her hair caught the morning sun, the small frown she made when she thought about something serious. She was still my daughter, yes, but she had become someone stronger. Someone who'd faced fear and guilt and survived. Mom, she said softly, finally breaking the silence. I just want to say thank you. For everything. For not yelling, for seeing me. Even when I didn't deserve it, I smiled faintly. You never stopped being my daughter, Claire. You just forgot it for a while. Her lips trembled, and for a second, I thought she might cry again. But she didn't. Instead, she hugged me, not the quick hug of a child, but the kind that says I'm finally home. That hug carried all the weight of the past weeks. The betrayal, the fear, the blackmail, the loss of her car, and the jewelry I thought I'd never see again. It also carried something else, forgiveness. Quiet, unspoken, but real. Later that day, we went outside together. The white convertible, once a symbol of greed and guilt, still sat under the oak tree, its paint scarred, its tires ruined. I'm sorry I ruined it, Claire whispered, touching the door gently. I shook my head. It's not ruined. It's a reminder of choices, consequences, and the truth. She nodded, eyes glistening. And the truth. You showed me how to face it. I didn't answer. Because sometimes words aren't needed. The quiet presence, the shared silence, can teach more than anything else. The next week passed slowly. Claire returned to work, this time openly confronting her mistakes. She met with her boss, admitted everything, and came home relieved, free. Finally free of the guilt that had crushed her spirit. I watched her grow through it all. The woman who had sold my jewelry, who had destroyed her own car in panic and shame, was becoming someone I could look at without fear. Someone I could trust again. I also noticed something in myself. The quiet revenge, the patience, the research, the calm exposure of Mark Trent's schemes. It hadn't hardened me. It had reminded me of my own strength. Not the kind that screams or destroys, but the kind that waits, watches, and lets the truth unfold naturally. One evening, we sat together on the porch, the sun setting low, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and earth. Claire leaned against me, her hand finding mine. Mom, what now? She asked. I looked out at the horizon, letting the soft light touch my face. Now, I said, we rebuild, slowly, carefully. We make sure the choices we make are ours. And ours alone. She nodded. I want to make things right. With you, with me, with everything. I smiled faintly, squeezing her hand. Then start with yourself. The rest will follow. For the first time in months, the house felt full, not of chaos, anger, or betrayal, but of quiet understanding. We didn't speak of Mark Trent again. He was a lesson, a shadow from the past that had finally been illuminated. Weeks later, I walked past the oak tree. The white convertible was gone, replaced by a small flower bed I'd planted, roses. Claire's favorite. I touched one of the blooms gently. Its petals were soft, delicate, and perfect, a reminder that even after storms, life grows again. Inside, Claire was cooking dinner. The smell of roasted vegetables and garlic filled the air. She called out to me, and I responded with a small laugh. Simple moments, simple joy, the things we'd lost and finally reclaimed. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, rain falling lightly outside. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes, faint lines, but a quiet, calm strength. I thought of all that had happened, the betrayal, the destruction, the secrets, and the revenge. And I realized something. Victory isn't in shouting. It's not in breaking. It's not even in revenge. Victory is in the quiet truth. In watching the darkness lift. In seeing your child, or yourself, stand tall again. I wrote in my journal. The pen gliding across the page. Pain can be power. Truth never dies. Silence speaks louder than vengeance. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Claire came to the window then, holding 2 mugs of tea. She smiled softly, no guilt, no fear. Just love. We drank together, watching the rain. No words were necessary. The storm had passed, and in its place, there was peace. The journey had been long, painful, and full of shadows. But the ending, though quiet, was ours. And sometimes, quiet is enough.